Hi. uh, so Nancy, on the break you were saying you had a question?
My question is around your experience when you said suddenly you became awake, and suddenly you were just awake, and it was all the time, and how, and then you said you changed your career. So I wondered if you being awake impacted your decision to change your career, or...
I'm not totally hearing you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wondered if you being awake impacted your decision to change your career from a photographer.
Yeah, completely.
Is that right?
I had talent for photography, but the world of trying to make it as a photographer just didn't feel good to me anymore. I didn't like the people I was hanging out with. I didn't like charming the collectors. I found myself getting totally intoxicated before my exhibitions. And I had always had an interest in psychology, had done a lot of reading all my life, so it was pretty simple to go back to therapy school and get some degrees and start practicing. And that just felt a lot more comfortable.
And you did being awake, as you say, give you the freedom to do that change, to make that change with...
I'm trying to pull a mic on this. Did it give me it gave me the psychological freedom to do it. Yeah.
And your wife, when you became awake, did you share it with her right away?
Well, what happened is she came home and found me sitting on the kitchen floor naked laughing. And that went on for like 2 or 3 days. So I couldn't exactly hide it from her.
And she stuck with you.
Yes, she did. She really stuck with me.
To her credit.
Well, I'm a very lucky man because she's a terrific woman and she likes me.
Yeah.
That's a great question.
Did you experience fear when you became awake?
No, I didn't experience any fear. No. The only thing I did experience was doubt. I thought, this is supposed to happen to really great people, you know, yogis and Maharajis and all this. This is happening to me. Is it? Or am I just emulating something that I've heard about or read about? And that went on for quite a while, really, kind of around and around. And finally, it was just undeniable. I mean, I felt free.
And it didn't stop?
No, it's never stopped. It never stops for a second. It can't go away. I mean, maybe it can, but so far it's lasted a long time now. I don't think it's going to stop. And this feeling of joy, I told you I was in bed for a long time with a broken back and serious pain. I mean, the worst pain I've ever felt. And I still had this joy.
Amazing.
I felt suicidal at times and I still felt joy. So, you know, yeah. I've got to give that some credence.
Yeah. Yeah, you naked laughing on the floor reminds me of the story of the laughing monk.
Once again.
The story of the laughing monk.
Oh.
The one that I think...
It's a Buddhist story.
Yeah, it's a Buddhist story, but there's Buddha, who's this slim-looking character, and there's a kind of fatter monk who is laughing, and I guess the story is that he was told what is the story, Eric?
It was a silent sermon performed by a Buddha, and the monk got it and started laughing.
Understood it and laughed and laughed and laughed, yeah. So.
Yeah, well, you know.
Just like you.
Life can be really tragic. It actually is tragic. There's no way to put a finer point on it, So I think all we can do is laugh and be happy if we're able, because the ending is not pretty.
Now, there's some excellent advice.
For most of us, it's. I'm 74 years old, and I realize that statistically, I have a 25% chance of dementia pretty soon. So that can't be written off. So if you wake up in the morning and are honest about these things, and you've seen it happen to other people, I think you better know how to laugh.
Yeah. It's well said.
I know people don't like hearing that. It's supposed to be glorious at the end and all that, but it seldom is. My dear friend Robert passed away, and the last 2 years of his life was just miserable. And I saw him a lot, spoke with him a lot, and he was just constantly suffering. He wanted to die, but he didn't die until he died.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I loved him. So his suffering is, I experienced it intimately, and there's no reason why my ending won't be that bad. I mean, or not, yeah. But see, what most of us like to do, I've observed, is we like to do or not, and the reality of it, we don't like to see that. But what I find is that by seeing that, I can appreciate this moment when I am compos mentis, or if I'm not, no one will tell me, so I can be happy. Before the dementia sets in, when you're old enough to really see life as it is and enjoy that, that's a golden time. They call it the golden age. The ending is not usually golden, but the time before the ending can be really beautiful. And that's where I find myself now. I know I'm skating on thin ice, but so far it's kind of cool. Yeah. And so that's that. Yeah. So that's what I mean by awake. See, awake is when you don't lie to yourself about anything. Not because you tell yourself I mustn't lie to myself, but because you don't. You just can't. That's what I mean by awake. Everything is factual. It's clear. There's no religion. There's no belief in salvation. There's no, if I practice such and such, then I will attain this and that. It's not like that.
You're good.
It's just now. It's just now. This is the best moment.
And did you experience any loss of God when you...
Any loss of...
God?
Of God?
Any belief or anything when you came away?
Well, I don't think I ever believed in God, so there wasn't that much to lose. Yeah. In fact, even as a child, I found the whole thing ridiculous. Really. Yeah. When I heard people talk about... I had a lot of friends who went to Catholic school, and they had to do these catechisms, and they would explain it to me and everything. And even as a child, I thought, what is this bullshit? And I would say the same thing now, except I wouldn't say that to someone who believes in it. Because how do I really know that? And maybe for that person, it serves a really important purpose. And who am I to kick the crutch out if they need the crutch? Then I'm responsible for that person, and I don't really want to be. So I was telling Eric when we were talking that in my psychotherapy practice, I treated many religious believers, and I never cast any doubt on their beliefs, none of it. In fact, I was scrupulous in keeping my own irreverence out of those situations and just accepting straight ahead that that's what this person believes, and they might be right. I mean, I'm kind of an atheist. I'm not even an atheist. It's just a non-issue for me. I don't think of it, but I could be wrong. Maybe this really is God speaking through my mouth. I doubt it, but it's possible. Yeah. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
I know you're only here for the day, you and Yurik.
Yeah.
And so it's great. I'm so glad you made it.
Oh, we feel so lucky to be here for the day. It worked out so well.
Yeah.
Rabbi, I finished your book, and so I'm going to try to piggyback a question, but I might take a little while to get it out. Good, take a break. Let me just chatter. In the last chapter, you talk about just finding your peace. It just is, what makes you happy. And as I was listening to, what human nature is, and I look and reflect at my own experience. Yeah, when my back's been against the wall, I've been really violent. But yet, as I seem to be clearing some of my identity, I'm way more peaceful and more true to myself. And that just makes me happy. Is that just in the DNA because that's not a survival thing then either, because I'm just content and happy. So it's not really the fight or flight or fuck. I'm just content and I'm in my own world and I'm good. And that's a sweet spot. So what, in your experience, where do you think that comes from for you? I mean,
I can't account for it. Count your blessings.
Do you think it's a tendency in human nature? Is it in the DNA, or why does that only make me happy when I'm honest with my surroundings and myself and content?
Why is it? I didn't hear the last sentence.
Why is that when I'm most happy now in my life? I'm not striving. I'm just content with what is, and being true to everything around me.
Well, if you're, what I'm understanding that you're saying that you just feel happy all the time.
Yeah, but I noticed that in your book, in the last chapter, you said the same thing.
Well, the last chapter, for those who haven't gotten that far, is about the myth of Sisyphus. In that myth, Sisyphus defied the gods, and as punishment was forced to push a heavy boulder uphill. And just when he reached the top where he was supposed to deposit that boulder, it would roll back down again to the bottom of the hill. And he was condemned to repeat that for eternity. So there's no escape, there's no exit. And Albert Camus, a French philosopher, took that story and considered it and wanted to find that Sisyphus was happy in the sense that you're saying, I just feel happy. Yeah. And he asked, how could that be? How could that be? Just happy. And what Camus discovered is that he was happy because when the boulder rolled down again, he was relieved of the task of pushing it uphill and had this long walk downhill to retrieve it again, and that was the rest time, and he could just be happy. And I imagine that when you say you're happy all the time, that's because you've resigned yourself to the hopelessness of this task. In one way or another of being human, you really can't get anywhere. I mean, you can get somewhere if you need to make a living and get a job and pays the rent. That's an accomplishment, no doubt. But that won't make you happy.
Where do you think the shift comes in? Where is it just a resignation, or is it just trusting in life? Is that in a DNA? Is it just a thought process where you're accepting life?
Well, for me, it's that some moments are filled with sadness and pain, and other moments are filled with joy. And I just take it each moment as it is and don't try to escape from it, just digest it, understanding that nothing is permanent. And this is a flow. And we don't get to decide what the flow is going to bring. I mean, I never chose to have a broken back, but I had one. And somehow in that experience, I found joy.
Do you feel like, but is it in the DNA of that now that is joy to you or to me that
Well,
you find that space in this experience or
if you ask
the propensity for it?
so when you ask, is it in the DNA?
Yeah.
In terms of what I was saying before about a biological view,
Right, yeah.
then you would have to say this serves some survival function. Otherwise, it would not be here.
Right, that's
Yes?
what I'm asking, yeah.
That's the idea of evolutionary biology, psychobiology. So, does it serve some purpose to be happy? Whistle while you work? I guess so. It must. Maybe it makes it easier to do what we must. If we're happy to do it, maybe it makes it easier. I don't know. But the basic assumption that I make is that everything that's here is here because it serves the purpose of survival. When I say survival, all I mean is fertilizing the egg, and the two people who did that somehow contribute to the survival of the resulting baby. It doesn't mean it makes you religious or you use your intelligence to transcend the human condition. I don't think that's in the DNA. To me, there's a self-aggrandizement where we use this cortex in the front, which is all that distinguishes us from a lower animal. That's your brain. That's the prefrontal cortex. It's impossibly thin. That's all we got going for us. I think it's a misuse to imagine that we're going to solve the great mysteries of reality with. We didn't evolve to do that. And so somehow I think people have gone awry when they do it. I don't mean that religion doesn't need to be here. I think it does. I think it has a survival function. That's why it's existed all this time. Probably by bonding cultures together, making an order so that people could cooperate and not just kill each other because God doesn't like that. That's probably a good idea. But I mean when people sit around imagining that they understand reality, I don't think we can. I know I can't, and I don't imagine that anyone else can either, because I have a pretty good brain, not the highest functioning one on the planet, but it's not that bad, and I don't seem to have any insight into reality at all.
Well, as my religious view has dropped off, well, I still have a better moral standard. Not that I have a moral standard. It's like the Tao Te Ching. I live it more freely. It's more natural. But I'm just curious if you think that's in the DNA, where that's where your peace is. Like in the Tao Te Ching, it says, when you lose this, then all of a sudden religion shows up. If you lose your way this way, then familial things, because you have to lean on structure to try to keep a society that's safe versus just being free, and it'll be safe. It'll perform at its best. I guess that's my interpretation of it.
Yeah, so I assume that these structures that are in place, including, say, the Catholic Church, it has a function. It does something. It's lasted a very long time, and it's very expensive in terms of energy. It has a very high cost. I mean, all these guys sitting on the thrones with the gold hat, someone has to pay for that. And why? Well, it must be doing something, otherwise it would have faded out a long time ago. But that doesn't mean that I have to participate in it. And when I say, well, I'm awake and I'm free, that's exactly what I mean. I don't need that. But I'm not saying that it's not needed by the human race. I'm kind of glad it is.
Your situation where you're at now, it's just a happening where you're free and you're just true to yourself, and that's all there is, but it just shows up like that as you're clear.
No, sometimes it takes gumption. I mean, when I was lying in, sorry to keep going back to the broken back, but it's the thing that's closest right now as a metaphor. There were times when I had to have a talk with myself and say, man, you're going to have to get out of this bed. It hurts, but if you don't get out of bed, you're going to die in this bed. So stand up. You know, I have to have out loud, except I was more vulgar about it. But that was the message. Stand the fuck up, Robert. Come on. And I would say that to myself. And I also find myself often in life saying to myself, it'll be okay, Robert, you can do it. So when I say I'm free, I don't mean that there's no struggle. But that's what the last chapter's about. I'm willing to keep pushing the rock up the hill, even though I know that it's useless. I'm not going to get it to the top of the hill. No one is, I say. And that's, yes? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. It's a good question.
I'm a little curious about your experience because you...
So Maria, forgive me. My hearing loss is mostly in the high register, which means that the people I would most like to hear, women, are the ones I can least hear. So please speak up.
So, because you study psychotherapy
Yes.
after your awakening.
Yes. Well, I studied it before too, but informally.
Yeah, okay.
As a autodidact. Yes.
Do you think that your opinion and how you experience things would have been different now if you hadn't studied psychotherapy?
Oh, definitely. I think my psychotherapy work has had a profound influence. I see everyone psychologically, immediately. And I'm intuitive also. So when I meet someone, I can look into that person's eyes and I can see things, and they're psychological things. What's that?
I said, uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Yeah, well, you know, that's an interesting uh-oh, because one of the things that happened to me in practicing psychotherapy would be sometimes people were very hesitant in the first session, and I would say to them, I can't read your mind, you know, you're going to have to tell me where it hurts. I said, this is like a visit to the doctor, I know, but that's what it is, so you have to tell me where it hurts. But I was lying in a sense, because often I could really see where it hurt. Body language and all that, it tells a lot about people. Yeah. Gee, this is just glorious, all these bright faces looking at me. I was saying yesterday, I'm a loner. I spend most of my time alone, almost all of it. I mean, I have a mate. We're together. We eat together and talk and sleep in the same bed. But the rest of the time, we aren't together very much. She likes solitude also. So this is like a feast. It really is. So thank you. Thank you.
Again, that's another non-question.
I'll make it into a question.
Great.
You'll see.
Help me out, Robert. Bit of a rambling. It's just sort of a comment on what's going on in the world these days. It seems to be a bit of confusion happening out there. A lot of funky stuff. And one of the things that's again my observation, and I would love to hear you how you relate to this subject, is we have a basic tendency as a human being to make sense of the world that we live in. So I call that sense-making mechanism. Yeah. And if for whatever reason, if something happens, then where that sense-making gets dissolved or disappears, but where the ego structure still remains intact, meaning that the sense of separateness stays in, that people feel the greatest loss. So this is again my rambling about perhaps the role of institutions like religions and churches, right? That they have a function, which is very interesting that you've mentioned, that they do provide a structure and a framework for us to navigate through life, you know. And however, this is being dismantled right, left, and center. In Europe, is experiencing this at the moment. You know, the church is gone. The authority of the state is gone. All the old frameworks are gone. Right? And in your psychotherapy or in your current place, do you have any comment on that? Do you have any advice to people about that?
Well, the deconstruction began in the 20th century as an academic discipline, started in academia, where factual, there were no more facts, they're just points of view. And one point of view is as good as any other. This comes out of the French Academy. And these things leak out into culture, and they become unquestionable eventually. You could see the same thing going on nowadays with this safe spaces thing that started in the colleges, and now it's in the corporations. There are microaggressions at work now, not just in the college classes, and their sensitivity training is now mandatory in a lot of big corporations. Before you can get the job, you have to go through this course on how not to threaten women by telling them you find them attractive, for example, which to me is absurd, but that seems to be what's required if you want the job. I mean, if we work in the same office, I'm not supposed to ask you out for a drink. It makes no sense because people are attracted after all, but those are the new rules. I'm glad I'm not dating. It's a minefield. So that's present day, but back in the 20th century, this deconstruction happened and everyone took it seriously. And so they throw the baby out with the bathwater. We do need to criticize the structures, but not just tear them down as if they had no utility or no, there was no necessity for any structure at all. That's a crazy idea, and yet that's basically what's going on culturally. And no wonder the level of anxiety and fear is increasing, because people have nothing to hold on to. And most of us really need something to hold on to. You mentioned free fall before when we were talking on the break. So I don't need anything to hold on to, that's true. But I can't wave a wand and suddenly no one on this planet Earth needs something to hold on to. And yet that seems to be what Derrida or can't think of his name right now, these French deconstructionists, that was the basic idea, that this is all bullshit. None of your beliefs have any utility at all, and just throw the whole thing out, and it's meaningless. Maybe this goes back to Nietzsche, I don't know, but it's a long wave, and we're seeing it now. Well, I'm not seeing it because it's not really here that much, but in the US, I think it's a lost cause, basically. I don't think they'll be able to rescue that place anymore. It seems like it's going downhill really quick. And Europe, I think it's a big problem also. It's a different problem. But the Americans don't feel guilty. They feel the opposite of guilty. They feel they can do no wrong and just let's keep these nasty people out. The Europeans got the other end of the stick. They feel we've done wrong somehow, and all of these people who want to move here, we shouldn't stop them at all because we owe it to them. And I don't think that's going to work out really well either. So.
Well, this is my point, I guess, if I may jump in again. It just feels to me that we live in this time of confusion, and a lot of people live in this state of anxiety, perpetual anxiety. And I think often, more often than not, you know, a lot of people are looking for some answers and clarity outside of these established venues such as religions, you know. So you come across these talks of non-duality, but non-duality, if you're quite honest, obviously, is not the answer to the everyday problems of living. It's
well,
not,
to what question would non-duality be the answer?
exactly. That's my point. You know.
Yes.
So then it just appears to be often muddling the situation more than clarifying. So you on the other hand, I think have become very honest about these things, and I appreciate that honesty, and I think this clear understanding that there is a functional side to us, that every day when we go out on the street and we meet other people, we function dualistically. There is no choice.
Obviously, yes.
Right, obviously.
Yes.
So thank you. And hence, so I'm sorry again, this is a bit rambly, but that's my question, I guess. You know.
Well, you're not rambling. I thought you brought to light some very important points, and I think the last one is a real winner. We function dualistically. That's so obvious. Otherwise, there would be no conversation. If we were really all in the same consciousness, there would be no need to speak. There'd be no views and opinions. Everyone would just understand everything all the time. And so when people claim to, the worst thing is when they claim to have attained a non-dual state. That's ridiculous. But when they talk about non-dual, well, there's non-dual psychotherapy, and I hear people talking about this. I've been asked about it. I have no idea what that would be. Someone comes to you in pain, and you say, "Don't worry about it. You're part of God, and no worries, you're just dreaming this pain anyway." I guess that's non-dual therapy. What else?
Don't worry about it. You're not even there. Right?
Say it again?
Don't worry about it because you're not even there.
Yes, don't worry about it. That's not your problem. Yeah. And see, it's entirely dualistic. A marriage is dualistic, entirely dualistic. The people have a common interest, so there's a kind of world, a non-dual sphere to the whole thing. But within that globe of shared interest, people have their separate interests, and they shouldn't just give those up and melt down into some puddle where we all have the same views on everything. I mean, I wouldn't know how to deal with that. There's no stimulation in it. You sometimes see young lovers get into that state for a while, where they're like the Bobbsey twins or something. They wear the same clothes, they get the same tattoos and all of this. But that has to wear off, I hope. I really, I kind of hope that wears off. So, yeah, and when I meet someone, I want to know about that person. I don't want to project my knowing onto that person, which that's what non-duality is. You just say, well, we're all the same. it's a cosmic understanding. We all have that. No, we don't. We don't all have the same understanding. Right? Am I right there?
Yes, thank you.
No.